The cold concrete pressed against my cheek. My eyelids felt unbearably heavy, sealed by something I didn't dare think about. When I tried to pry them open, darkness swallowed everything except a thin ribbon of light leaking through a narrow slit above the wooden staircase. The chain clinked when I moved. Metal scraped against my ankle, skin torn, raw and oozing. How long had it been? Time here melted into something shapeless, with no days or nights, only an endless string of damp earth, moldy air, the steady drip of water in a far corner, and the weight of the chain tethering me to the steel pipe running along the wall. My throat burned. When was the last time I drank water? Yesterday? The day before? I wasn't sure I remembered dates anymore. My mouth was so dry my tongue felt glued to the roof of my mouth. I tried to sit up, but my body trembled from weakness. This room, no. This cellar wasn't large. Rough concrete walls, low ceiling, no windows. Only the old staircase leading to the single source of light, though the wooden door at the top was always shut. I had no idea how long I'd been here. 3 weeks? A month? Longer? I could only remember fragments, scattered like shards of glass. I remembered being Claire Whitmore, 28 years old, a nurse at a community health center in Atlanta. I remembered my night shift, the last patient, my coworkers' tired laughter echoing as she headed home. I remembered unlocking my car in the hospital garage, the autumn wind cutting through my thin jacket, then a sharp pain at the base of my skull, light collapsing into darkness, and the complete unraveling of everything. And then here, the oppressive quiet made my head spin. No familiar footsteps of the masked man who brought food, no metallic click of the lock turning, only silence, a silence far more terrifying than his presence. I squinted at the sliver of light, straining to listen. Wind? Traffic? No, too distant. Then suddenly, a sound I had never heard once during my captivity. Voices. Not one, several. Heavy footsteps pounding across the wooden floor above, shouting, something crashing. A roar of command so loud my heart hammered against my ribs. I shrank back, instincts screaming, retreating into the corner until the chain pulled tight, slicing pain through my ankle. Air stalled in my lungs as the door at the top of the stairs was kicked open. A blade of white light slashed downward, so sharp it made my eyes sting. A man's silhouette emerged, standing in the center of the beam as if he were made of the light itself. I blinked, trying to focus. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his stance radiating strength and restraint. His expensive suit clung to him, drenched as though he had walked through a storm. His voice carried through the space, low and edged with tightly coiled fury. Why was someone like him here? Who were they? Were they connected to the man who took me? Or worse, an entirely different faction? Another voice answered him, urgent and obedient. Then the man's polished shoes descended each step, slow but unwavering. As he drew closer, the harsh light softened enough for me to see his face. Dark gray eyes, cold as steel, yet layered with something unfamiliar as he looked at me. Not hostility, not indifference. Anger, yes, but not directed at me. He knelt, keeping a respectful distance, his voice shifting into something gentler yet still commanding. He asked my name, and when I tried to speak, my throat burned so badly only a rasp came out. He nodded as if he understood everything. He called me Claire, as though he had known me before this. My heart tightened. How did he know my name? He pulled out his phone, typed quickly, then ordered someone to bring bolt cutters. When the metal snapped and the chain gave way, my legs felt weightless and dizzy. I collapsed forward, and the man's strong arms caught me, surprisingly gentle for someone carved from frost and fury. Just before darkness pulled me under again, I heard him say something that sent a shiver through every nerve in my body. Claire, you're safe now. I am Julian Maddox, and I swear to you, this will never happen again. Then everything slipped into the void. If you're still listening and this story has touched something inside you, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel, like and share this video, so we have the strength to keep bringing heartfelt stories every day. And if you don't mind, could you tell me where you're watching from? Leave a comment below and let us know which corner of the world this story has reached. We cherish every word you share. Consciousness returned as if I were rising from the bottom of a thick, cold dream. The smell of disinfectant, the faint beeping of machines, and the dim hum of fluorescent lights still echoed somewhere in my memory. But now they were replaced entirely by the scent of dust and the voices of strangers. The quick, Sharp thud of leather shoes on wooden floorboards above me sounded as though someone were being chased. I didn't know who they were, or whether they had come for me or for something far more terrifying, but instinct whispered that something enormous was about to happen. I held my head, my heart pounding as fractured images dragged me back to the moment the nightmare began. That night, I had just finished a 12-hour shift at the community health center, my collar still holding the sterile scent of disinfectant and exhaustion weighing down every step. The parking lot was empty, a cold wind sweeping in from the street and sending a shiver down my spine. I tightened my coat and hurried to unlock my car. When my hand touched the door handle, a faint sound rose behind me, not loud enough to startle, but strange enough to make me turn. No one, only a dim, murky corner and a branch brushing against a metal fence. I turned back, opened the trunk to retrieve a medical kit I had forgotten, when a chill raced down my spine. A shadow emerged, behind me. Too late. A violent blow at the base of my skull sent me crumpling, and the world spun into a black, spiraling void. I didn't remember how I was taken, or whether I fought back. Everything was nothing but shredded memory. I woke in darkness, chained, head throbbing, mouth parched, wrists scraped raw, with not a single soul around me. In that instant, a loud thud above snapped me back into the present. A crash, then scattered shouts. I strained to listen. Someone yelled a name, a man's voice sharp with command, followed by the shatter of something glass or porcelain. My heart pounded, unsure whether it was fear or hope. I had never heard sounds like these during my captivity. Usually there were only the soft steps of my captor, the click of keys unlocking the door, the silent slide of a plate across the floor. But this time was different. There were many voices, there was chaos, then gunfire, one shot, then a second. I curled instinctively, arms over my head. Metal clattered onto concrete above, rattling the ceiling. I heard someone shout, "The cellar! There's someone down there!" Light burst through as the staircase door was kicked open. Footsteps rushed downward, weapons glinting. A man dressed in black reached me first, his flashlight aimed directly at me, his eyes widening with shock. Behind him was the man who would save me, Julian Maddox. He didn't rush, but every step he took made the others pause as if struck by an invisible force. He didn't need to yell. He only looked, and the world obeyed. When he saw me, his expression flickered with something like devastation, before turning into a fury so sharp it was almost frightening. Not anger at me, anger at the world that had allowed this to happen to me. I didn't understand why he knew me. I didn't know why he was here, why this house mattered. But in that moment I sensed one thing clearly. I was no longer alone. When Julian knelt before me and said in that low, rough voice that I was safe, I didn't believe him. I had lived in too much fear to believe anyone could save me out of kindness. But then his hand brushed my shoulder, gentle as if touching something fragile, and in those gray eyes I saw a promise, not spoken, but lived. When the last section of the chain snapped, I collapsed forward. Julian caught me as if that were the only purpose he had been born for, and I let myself fall into his arms, not resisting, because my body was far too weak, and perhaps some part of me wanted to believe that maybe, finally, someone had found me. His arms held me firmly, steadying me as my weight gave out. I didn't know how he caught me so quickly. I only remembered that when my knees buckled and my head dropped against his chest, the warmth there felt strangely familiar. I could feel his heartbeat strong and steady, so unlike the faint, uneven breaths shaking through me. His scent carried a hint of burned wood and early rain, something that made me want to sink into endless sleep. Julian didn't speak at first. He simply held me, his head angled down to shield my face from the harsh light. Then his voice cut through the air, firm but without anger. "Get her to the car. Call Dr. Hayes. Prepare the West Room. No one gets near her unless I say so." The men in black scattered instantly, moving with the precision of well-trained shadows. One bent to lift me, but Julian stopped him with a single raised hand. "I'll do it. No one touches her." There was no room for argument in his voice. He lifted me effortlessly, his arms tightening around me with care, as though I were something precious and breakable. My head fell against his shoulder, my vision blurring as the world tilted. I heard his footsteps on each worn wooden step, felt the steady, unhurried rhythm beneath my limp body. When we emerged into daylight, the brightness stung my eyes and I whimpered. Julian lowered his shoulder to shield me, his hand brushing gently through my hair to calm me. I wanted to ask who he was, how he knew me, why he had been in that cursed house at the exact moment I needed someone. But my throat was too dry, my mind too fogged, my lips only trembling uselessly. He placed me carefully in the back seat of a black SUV, its engine rumbling steadily as though nothing extraordinary had happened. A salt and pepper-haired man opened the door for him, worry in his eyes but silent. Julian said quietly, "Call Ezra. Tell him to prepare a sterile room. And coffee. I'll need a strong one after this." The man nodded and hurried off. Julian climbed into the seat beside me, his gaze never leaving my face. I must have looked awful, hair tangled, skin dirty, lips cracked, clothes rumpled. But in his eyes I saw no disgust, no pity. Only rage, a quiet, cold fury that made the air around him shift. I closed my eyes, the scent of leather mixing with the faint warmth of his cologne pulling me toward unconsciousness. His voice reached me one last time, almost a whisper, meant more for himself than for me. "He will pay for this. Claire, I swear to you, no one touches you without facing me." Everything after that melted into drifting haze. No more chains, no more darkness, only the warmth of a stranger with razor-sharp eyes and arms soft as winter blankets. And for the first time after so many days of terror, I allowed myself to sleep, not from exhaustion, but because I finally believed that maybe, this time, I had truly been saved. I woke in a room completely unfamiliar, but unlike every time before, there was no darkness, no iron chain scraping my skin, no musty dampness sinking into my lungs. Instead, there was the faint scent of lavender oil, a soft wash of warm golden light slipping through the curtains, and smooth sheets cradling my aching body. Everything was so gentle that I didn't dare move, afraid this might be another cruel dream. I opened my eyes again, slowly scanning the room. The ceiling was high, a crystal chandelier hanging overhead, the walls covered in pale cream wallpaper, and a velvet armchair sat beside a large window overlooking a lush green garden. The room was too beautiful, too peaceful, almost suspiciously so. On a small table beside the bed sat a glass of water and an open book. I tried to sit up, but a sharp sting in my ankle made me gasp. The wooden door a few feet away opened, and a middle-aged woman with neatly pinned gray hair stepped inside. She wore a gray apron, her face kind, though her eyes were remarkably sharp. She approached, her voice soft and steady. "Oh, you're awake. Don't try to sit up too quickly. Your leg is still healing. I'm Jeanette, the housekeeper here. Mr. Julian asked me to look after you." Her smile was warm in a way that felt strangely grounding, not forced, not pitying, just gentle, like someone who had spent a lifetime caring for others. She stepped back toward the door and called downstairs. "Dr. Hayes, she's awake." While we waited, she poured water from a pitcher into a glass and held my head as I drank in slow sips. The cool water sliding down my throat made me tremble, like tasting life again after a long drought. I wanted to ask where Julian was, but the moment my lips moved, the door opened again. An older man entered, tall and lean, with white hair and silver-rimmed glasses. He carried a small medical bag and moved with brisk, practiced steps. "Dr. Ezra Hayes," he said in a calm, firm voice as he approached. "Claire, I'm going to do a quick examination. If anything hurts or feels uncomfortable, tell me immediately." I nodded. He placed his stethoscope against my chest, checked my lungs, then carefully unwrapped the bandage at my ankle. The wound left by the chain was still deep, but it had been cleaned and treated meticulously. He frowned at the bruises on my wrists and the scratches across my body, but said nothing, simply writing notes before signaling to Jeanette. "I'll prepare a light meal. She needs food. And no one is to ask her anything until she chooses to speak." He spoke as though I were a special case, someone to protect rather than interrogate. It was only later that I learned I had been missing for over 3 months. 3 months stolen from my life, though in that darkness, it had felt like an eternity. When they left, I remained on the bed, clutching the half-empty glass of water. My head still felt hazy, the world piecing itself back together in fragments that didn't quite fit yet. Who was Julian Maddox? How did he know me? Why had he appeared at the exact moment I needed someone most? And more urgently, where was I? It took several minutes before I realized I no longer felt afraid. Not because I believed I was safe, but because something in the way those people looked at me, tended to me, made me believe they had no intention of hurting me. I turned toward the window, watching sunlight drift through the leaves outside. For the first time since those days in that cold basement, I felt air filling my lungs, truly filling them. And in that moment, a thought surfaced in my mind, clear and steady as the rhythm of my heartbeat returning to normal. I needed answers, and I wasn't leaving until I had them. Later that afternoon, as the light softened across the window pane, a gentle knock sounded at the door. Not urgent, not demanding, just enough to announce a presence. I sat up straighter despite the exhaustion pulling at me. Jeanette's voice came from the hall, soft yet certain. "You have a visitor." I tightened my grip on the blanket. I knew who it was. I had been waiting for this moment since opening my eyes in this room. The door opened, and Julian Maddox stepped inside. He was the same man I had seen in the basement, tall, imposing, eyes sharp as steel, yet now he wore a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled, the collar undone. He looked nothing like a savior, and even less like the head of some dangerous organization as in the movies. But something in the way he moved, in the way his gaze held mine, made it impossible to relax. Julian stopped a few steps away, keeping a respectful distance, his gray eyes fixed on me. He gave a slight nod, his voice low and cool like the first wind of winter. "I'm sorry I couldn't come sooner, but at least you're safe now." I stared at him without speaking. Inside me churned a storm of gratitude, suspicion, fear, and a smoldering anger. I tightened the blanket, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Who are you? How do you know me? And why was I in that basement?" Julian was silent for a few seconds, weighing each word. He stepped a bit closer, his tone even. "My name is Julian Maddox. The house where you were held, it belongs to my family. I didn't know you were there until my men tracked the signs." I went still, a cold trembling rising from within. "Your family? You mean—" He nodded, his eyes unflinching. "The owner of that basement is Landon Maddox, my younger brother." I froze. Anger surged, quickly swallowed by confusion and disbelief. I was imprisoned, starved, chained in your brother's house, and you expect me to believe you knew nothing about it? Julian stepped closer, his voice dropping into something almost pained. "I don't expect you to trust me immediately, but I swear to you, Claire, I didn't know. Landon and I have been estranged for years. The path he chose, it has nothing to do with me anymore." I searched his eyes, desperate for truth. I had learned not to trust words, but eyes were harder to falsify. And in his, I saw something that wasn't guilt, wasn't deceit. It was regret. It was fury. It was the heartbreak of being betrayed by his own blood. Julian stayed where he was, not stepping closer. "You have every right to doubt me. But I didn't save you to force your trust. I saved you because no innocent person should endure what you went through." The room fell into silence. I looked at him, the man who clearly held power, yet refused to wield it against me. A man who could command everyone in this estate, yet stood waiting for my reaction, as though if I simply shook my head, he would retreat. I didn't know how much I believed. But I knew one thing. If what he said was true, then Landon Maddox was the one who abducted me, imprisoned me, and he was still out there. I lifted my head, my voice hoarse but steady. "So, what are you going to do now?" Julian looked at me, his gray eyes sharpening like a blade drawn from its sheath. "I'm going to find him, and I will not let him hurt anyone else, especially you." My first nights in the mansion were filled with fractured sleep. Even with the warm bed and the kind of quiet that felt almost removed from the world, my mind refused to loosen its grip. Every time I closed my eyes, the images of that dark basement returned like ghosts clinging to my skin. Some nights I jolted awake, gasping, my heart pounding loudly against my ribs, my shirt drenched in sweat, my eyes darting through the room as if searching for someone hiding in the shadows. Once, I screamed so loudly that Jeanette rushed in at midnight, her face carved with worry, pulling me into her arms without saying a single word. I hated that weakness, hated how breakable I felt. But the more I tried to act strong, the more exhausted I became. I ate little, spoke even less. During the day, I wandered through the garden behind the mansion, sitting for hours beneath the old oak tree, doing nothing, thinking nothing. But when night fell, I felt small and unbearably alone. One night, after waking again to the sound of my own terrified voice, the door flew open almost instantly. Julian stood there, silent for a moment, then stepped inside. I expected him to ask if I was all right, but instead he pulled the velvet armchair close to the bed, sat down, and said in a low, steady voice, "I'll stay here tonight, if you don't mind." I didn't answer, nor did I send him away. Perhaps a part of me had hoped he would do exactly that. He sat there all night, in the dark, not sleeping, not speaking unless I did. When I drifted off, I dreamed I was back in the basement, being dragged through thick, choking air, my hands bound, my mouth gagged, trapped inside a nightmare I couldn't escape. I struggled, screamed, fought the shadows closing in. But this time the dream didn't end in darkness. A hand touched my shoulder, feather-light and slow, and his voice whispered near my ear, pulling me back to reality. "Claire, I'm here, you're safe." I woke again, tears soaking the pillow. Julian remained in the chair, his gaze steady and strangely warm. He didn't touch me again, but kept his hand suspended just close enough to let me know I wasn't alone. Night after night passed that way. He appeared when I needed him, quiet as a guardian at the gate of my sleep. Some nights he spoke in a calm, steady tone, telling me bits of stories with no beginning or end, his voice grounding me more than his words. Once he told me about a summer when he and Landon ran away from home, to fish at the beach, and got caught when they returned with sunburned feet glowing red. A soft sadness flickered in his eyes then, as if the man he once was had cracked open for just a moment, revealing a child who once believed everything could be fixed with a simple apology. I didn't know when it happened exactly, but little by little, Julian's presence stopped making me tense. Each time he entered the room, I no longer felt the need to pull away. When his eyes rested on me, I no longer felt fear or discomfort. Instead, there was a strange sense of safety. Not the kind that comes from dramatic rescues, but the steadier kind, the kind that comes from knowing someone won't leave when you need them. One morning, I woke without a nightmare for the first time. Sunlight poured through the window like warm honey, and when I turned to the chair where Julian usually sat, it was empty, but a warm cup of tea and a small handwritten note lay on the side table. "I'm meeting Reed. I'll be back before lunch. Drink your tea, eat breakfast. It's sunny today, go to the garden. Don't hide in this room." I let out a quiet laugh, the first genuine laugh I'd made in days. I sipped the tea, peppermint softening across my tongue, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a temporary guest. For the first time, I felt alive. That afternoon, the weather was gentler than usual, the sun dusting the leaves with light. I sat on the stone bench in the west garden, where pale lavender blossoms lined the brick path. A breeze stirred the climbing roses, their scent floating softly in the air, lightening my chest. Footsteps sounded on the gravel, slow, steady, unhidden, like someone who didn't need permission and didn't fear rejection. I didn't turn, but I knew it was Julian. He paused beside the bench, silent for a moment as if waiting for my response. When I said nothing, he sat down, leaving a respectful space between us. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't bothered. Silence had become something we shared, and sometimes silence comforted more than words. But this time, I was the first to speak. "I used to think I'd never get out," I whispered, afraid that speaking too loudly might summon the memories back to life. Julian didn't answer immediately. He lifted his gaze to the trees in the distance, the wind brushing through dark strands of hair where a few silver threads caught the light. Then he asked, gently, with no pressure, "What scared you most then?" I thought for a moment, then spoke slowly. "Not dying, being forgotten, the feeling that each day passed and no one knew where I was. No one was looking. Thinking I could disappear completely and leave no trace in the world." Julian nodded lightly, his expression shadowed. "I understand. That fear, I've carried it since I was young. When I was a child, my parents used silence as punishment. The more I begged, the longer they stayed silent. Eventually, Landon and I began treating indifference as normal. I looked at him. For the first time, I didn't just see the cold, controlled man who had knelt beside me in the basement. I saw a boy who had once been left behind, who had built armor to survive. So I asked, "Then why choose this life? With your influence, your money, everything you could have done, why choose a path shaped by the same shadows you once feared?" Julian tilted his head slightly, his eyes falling to the grass as if searching for something there. "Because for a long time, I believed I didn't deserve anything different. When you grow up in violence and lies, you learn survival before love. And by the time you realize you could choose differently, you've already left too many consequences behind. I let his words settle between us, sinking into the quiet that followed. My early suspicions shifted not into blind trust, but into something deeper, understanding. I met his gaze directly. "If you believe you can't fix anything, then why save me?" He looked at me then, without turning away. "Because I couldn't let you become another crack in someone's life. And because, when I saw you in that basement, I knew that if I walked away, I wouldn't be able to live with myself." My heart trembled, and I didn't know how to respond. I simply turned my face toward the sunlight stretching across the grass. After a long moment, I spoke, almost to steady myself. "I don't know if I can forgive everything that happened. Not now. Not easily." Julian nodded. "I don't need your forgiveness. I just need you to live. Truly live, without the darkness holding you down. And if there's anything I can do to help you move forward, I will, no matter what path you choose." I clasped my hands in my lap, my heart heavy but somehow brighter. For the first time since it all began, I didn't feel alone in my pain. Someone was beside me, not trying to change the past, but willing to sit with me while I faced it. And sometimes, that alone was enough to begin healing. The next morning I woke earlier than usual. The sunlight had not yet reached the room when a hurried knock sounded at my door. Jeanette stepped inside, her face unusually tense. "Is something wrong?" I asked, my hand instinctively leaving the blanket. She hesitated, then spoke quietly. "One of the staff, Tom, has had a high fever since last night. He kept trying to work until this morning, but now he can't get out of bed." I stood up almost immediately. She led me to the staff quarters behind the mansion, a narrow, tidy hallway where Tom's small room sat at the end. The air was still, too still. Tom lay curled on the bed, sweat beading across his forehead, cheeks flushed red, his breathing heavy and uneven. I sat on the edge of the mattress and gently pressed my hand to his forehead, burning hot. I asked Jeanette to bring cold towels, warm water, and fever medicine, then stayed with him the entire morning, changing the towels, coaxing him to sip water, whispering reassurances each time he groaned from exhaustion. Something in the simple act of caring for someone reminded me of who I had been. My months as a nurse didn't teach me how to survive kidnappers or dark basements, but they had taught me patience, had taught me how to see the human being in their most vulnerable state. By afternoon, when Tom's temperature finally began to drop, I left the room. On my way back to the main house, I saw Julian standing under the porch, a cup of coffee in hand, his gaze turned toward the lake in the distance. When he saw me, he set the cup down and walked toward me. "How's Tom?" he asked. "He'll be fine. He just needs a few days of rest," I replied. Julian nodded, a flicker of softness crossing his eyes. He gestured toward the bench beneath the porch. We sat together, silent for a few minutes. Then he spoke, his voice low and strangely even. "There was a time I had more than 30 people working for me. Every one of them bowed when I passed. Every one of them obeyed without question. But none of them ever looked me in the eye, because they were afraid." I turned to him, surprised by the bluntness of his confession. He didn't look away. Instead, he faced me directly, as if choosing honesty over distance. For a long time, I thought that was strength, control, a way to survive in a world where a moment of softness could get you crushed. I waited, not interrupting. He looked down at his hands, choosing each word carefully. I made many mistakes. Not out of cruelty, but because I believed there were no other choices. When I was young, I followed my father's path, and I dragged Landon into it with me. The early deals were just financial. But slowly, I sank too deep. One day I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize who I had become. I tightened my fingers together, not out of fear, but because I understood that feeling, the shock of seeing a stranger in your own reflection. "What made you stop?" I asked softly. Julian was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice had dropped to a near whisper. "A close friend was killed in a job I should have prevented." I stood there in the middle of the night, his blood still on my hands, and for the first time, I was disgusted with myself. From that night on, I started cutting everything away, selling the company, breaking ties, rebuilding from nothing. I don't think I deserve a peaceful life, but I can do everything possible to avoid causing more harm. I said nothing, His story didn't erase what had happened to me, but it allowed me to see the man behind the armor. A man who had once been lost, who had once chosen wrong, and who was trying slowly, painfully, to find the road back. No one asked him to tell me any of this, but he chose to. And strangely, that made me feel respected. When I looked at him, he was still gazing at the lake, his gray eyes steady like still water. "Thank you for telling me," I said quietly. He didn't reply, just nodded. But from that moment on, I could feel the distance between us shift, shrinking by a breath. And for the first time, I began to believe that maybe we were both learning how to begin again. 2 days after our conversation on the porch, I was sitting by my window, rereading the recovery notes Dr. Hayes had left for me, when a soft knock came. I looked up immediately. Julian was the only one who knocked 3 times with that precise rhythm. I opened the door and found him standing there, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee, a hint of a hidden smile warming his eyes. He handed me one and tilted his head. "Are you free? There's something I want to show you." I didn't ask what it didn't matter. I followed him down the long corridor with polished wood floors and walls lined with old paintings. We stopped before a pair of white double doors at the end of the south wing. Julian opened them, and a soft breath of old paper drifted out. Before me stretched a grand library vaulted ceiling, bookshelves climbing from floor to arch, tall sliding ladders gliding along the walls like something out of an old film. Sunlight streamed in from tall glass windows, dusting the rows of books in a soft golden haze. In one corner stood a stone fireplace, beside it 2 velvet armchairs in chestnut tones, with a small wooden table holding a still warm cup of tea. I whispered without meaning to, "Is this your library?" Julian nodded, his voice light. "The only place where I never have to be on guard. No phones, no meetings, just books and time." He walked me through the shelves, pointing out his favorites: classic literature, philosophy, old poetry collections, several rare editions sealed carefully behind glass. I was surprised to hear him speak passionately about Dostoevsky, then just as earnestly about a volume of Mary Oliver poems he stumbled upon during a trip to Oregon. I listened not because of the titles, but because for the first time Julian wasn't wearing caution like a second skin. He looked like a man with a past and passions, with depth and shadows he was slowly illuminating. We sat by the fireplace, our cups resting side by side. The silence between us felt gentle, comforting, like the sound of pages turning. I gazed out the tall windows at the treetops shimmering in the light. "I used to think you weren't afraid of anything," I said softly, "but now I think maybe you understand fear better than anyone." Julian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, slowly, "I'm afraid that one day I'll wake up and realize all my efforts to change were pointless, that no matter what I do, what I've done will always be a part of me." I turned toward him, my fingers circling my coffee cup. "I used to think my wounds meant I couldn't love anyone again. But now I realize, sometimes it's the scars that make us kinder." Julian looked at me then, really looked, and something in his gray eyes seemed to settle, as if memorizing every word. "Do you want to come here every day?" he asked, his voice unexpectedly soft. "Read, drink, tea. Not to hide, but to live a little more." I nodded, smiling. I do." He smiled, truly smiled, and the rare gentleness in it warmed the room more than the fire. He stood, pulled a book from a nearby shelf, and placed it in my hands. "Start with page 1, and if you want, tomorrow I'll read it with you." I held the book to my chest, feeling something light and new unravel inside me. No chains, no basement, no threats growling in the dark. Only a room full of books, a man learning to love life again, and a woman learning how to trust once more. And perhaps, from the unlikeliest place, something was beginning to take root. That night, as I sat in the library finishing the last pages of an old novel, a violent crash from the front door jolted my heartbeat into my throat. The sound of shattering glass followed, then heavy footsteps pounding across the wooden floor, shouts rising in chaotic bursts I couldn't identify. I stood, my legs trembling beneath me, trying to hear where Julian was. My name echoed down the hallway, his voice cold yet unwavering. "Follow me now." I barely had time to react before his arms wrapped around me, pulling me close, firm but without hurting me. I froze against him as the world around us erupted into noise. Doors slammed, footsteps chased us through corridors, metal clattered sharply against metal. Julian dragged me through narrow hallways and down dim stairwells, emergency lights flickering through gaps in the walls just enough to reveal overturned wooden panels and precious objects scattered like debris after a storm. He said very little, only motioning for me to duck, stay silent, and shielding my eyes when flashes of light burst from small detonations and clouds of dust. When we reached a dark wooden wall, Julian stopped, pressed a hidden switch beneath a painting, and the panel slid open to reveal a steel door with a fingerprint scanner. He placed his hand on the sensor, and the door opened with a deep hydraulic groan. He pulled me inside and sealed it shut, and a thick silence wrapped around us like armor. I listened to my own breathing, to Julian's heart pounding close by, the tension so tight I swore I could hear the heartbeat of whoever was outside searching for us. In the panic room, the dim glow of surveillance screens cast pale reflections across shelves, stocked with water, emergency rations, and basic medical supplies. I sat down on the cement bench, my arms wrapped around my knees, trying to steady my breath, but my body trembled uncontrollably under the surge of adrenaline. Julian stood beside me, eyes locked on the monitors, his voice low and controlled. They're checking every room, every entryway, and they won't skip a thing. I leaned closer to the screens, watching dark figures sweep through rooms, hearing distant shouts and the harsh clangs of metal colliding. Fear and anger tangled in my chest like thorned vines. Julian didn't look away from the screens. His hand tightened slightly as, if gripping an invisible steering wheel, directing a battle from inside this steel chamber. And I realized that no matter how skilled the intruders were, Julian remained in command, anticipating every move, shielding me with a resolve that refused to crack. His voice cut through the hum of machines, careful and steady. "Breathe, Claire. I'm here. You're safe." I nodded, though safety felt like a fragile idea, my heart still racing, palms damp with sweat. A gunshot echoed through the feed, and Julian reacted instantly, hitting a sequence of buttons on the console. The screens shifted to reveal his security team taking positions, surrounding each intruder, sealing off corridors. Every movement was deliberate, precise, leaving no gap through which danger could slip. I leaned back against the wall, the flickering light from the monitors washing over me, listening to Julian issue commands in Italian. Quick, sharp, each word cutting through the tension like a blade. The chaos outside blended with his voice, forming a rhythm that was terrifying yet strangely grounding. Gradually, fear loosened its grip, replaced by a quiet confidence in the man standing inches from me. Julian turned toward me now and then, his gaze meeting mine long enough to remind me that I wasn't alone, that someone was holding the line for me. In that small steel room, while the world outside roared, I realized I was being protected by someone whose power came not only from control, but from an unwavering determination to keep me safe. My heart still hammered, but beneath the fear stirred an unexpected sense of calm. I closed my eyes and let Julian guide me through the storm, letting the gunfire, the footsteps, the shouts, become a distant drumbeat we would outlast. The steel door behind us sealed the world out, and for the first time in many weeks, I felt something close to absolute safety. When the gunfire finally began to fade, and the chaos subsided into a tense quiet, Julian remained at the screens, his eyes tracking every last movement of the intruders. I sat on the metal bench, my heart still pounding, my palms still slick with sweat, and I realized the danger wasn't over. Julian turned, his gaze locking onto mine, his voice deep and firm. "Claire, there's something you need to understand. You are the target, not me." My breath caught, confusion and fear rippling through me. He drew in a long breath before continuing. "The intruders didn't come for me because I'm the head of the family. They came for you, because Landon is still watching us." My eyes closed as the truth pressed into me, my heartbeat stuttering in my chest. Landon, his name alone, dragged every buried fear back to the surface. Julian leaned closer, lowering his voice but not his strength. "Landon never forgets. He never lets anything go. He knows you're here. He knows you disrupted his plans, and that's why you're his primary target." His words cut through me like cold steel. 3 months in darkness, 3 months in chains. And now I understood that the danger didn't end outside the mansion, it lingered in shadows I had never seen. Julian straightened, reaching toward the control panel as the cameras continued sweeping over every corner. And he spoke again. "We need to prepare for the possibility that Landon won't stop. He knows how to exploit information, how to find a way in, but I won't let him. Claire, you need to believe me. I will protect you to the very end." I watched the intensity in his eyes, the calm he held even as chaos buzzed outside the steel walls. A strange mixture of tension and reassurance coiled inside me. He wasn't only fighting the men outside, he was fighting the unseen danger that carried my name. He pulled a chair closer to me, his voice softer but still firm. "I know you're scared, but breathe slowly. Your heart will steady. I'm right here. No one will touch you." I bowed my head, trying to breathe through the dizziness, flashes of broken glass and pounding footsteps replaying in my mind. Julian noticed immediately. He placed a hand on my shoulder, gentle yet unwavering. "You've already survived the worst, and I won't let anything else happen to you." I lifted my gaze and saw him still watching the monitors, not missing a single detail. His control wasn't about dominance, it was a promise, a vow that I would not face this terror alone. He turned to me again, his voice edged with iron. "Landon doesn't know you're safe in this room, but he will try again. He will find new ways. But I have prepared for that. Every exit, every contingency, every man on this estate has one purpose: to protect you." My body felt both lighter and tensely alive, knowing the danger still lurked outside, but also knowing that Julian stood between me and the storm. For the first time in many weeks, safety felt real, anchored in the presence of someone who understood the cost of vigilance. Julian leaned closer, his voice gentler now but no less resolute. "Remember this, Claire. You are the target, not me. And that means I will not let anyone harm you, even if it costs me everything." I nodded, fear and gratitude surging in me like twin waves. From this moment forward, I was no longer a helpless victim, but I wasn't foolish enough to ignore the truth. Landon hadn't given up, and every choice we made from now on would be shaped by his shadow. I sat still, breathing in the same tight rhythm as Julian, realizing that this panic room was more than a shelter. It was the place where I first learned what it meant to trust, to lean on the one person capable of shielding me from the rage that Landon was preparing to unleash. The black car slipped through the winding mountain roads, the smell of damp wood and wet earth drifting in through each curve, bringing me a strange sense of peace after months of relentless tension. I leaned back into the seat, my body still trembling, my eyes fixed on the window where rows of pine trees stretched along the hillside, their leaves bathed in the golden haze of late afternoon. The soft light eased the tight rhythm of my heartbeat. Julian drove with a calm certainty, his hands steady on the wheel, his eyes locked forward as if nothing on the road could ever take him by surprise. I felt a little safer because of that, though fear still lingered at the back of my mind, whispering that Landon was still out there, watching, waiting. Julian didn't speak much. From time to time, he glanced at me with an expression that was both warm and stern, as if telling me that things would be all right, but vigilance was non-negotiable. When the car turned onto the private road leading to the mountain estate, the scenery shifted. Massive trees towered on both sides, their branches whispering to the wind, mixing birdsong with the hush of leaves. It felt like a world far removed from the chaos of the city. The house came into view, wood and stone, dark brown roof tiles, wide windows spilling warm light from inside. It looked both elegant and protective, like a place built to shelter someone who'd been broken. Julian stopped at the gate and opened the door for me. My footsteps echoed softly on the stone path in the stillness of the mountains. I inhaled deeply, the crisp air filling my lungs, and for the first time in weeks I felt that I could breathe without fear tightening around my ribs. Julian walked beside me, his gaze sweeping the surroundings with practiced precision, yet I no longer felt threatened by his vigilance. Instead, a small flame of hope flickered inside me here. Perhaps I could heal. Inside, the estate was warmer than I imagined. High wooden ceilings, stone floors, soft golden lights that made the place feel safe. "Mrs." Jeanette appeared almost immediately, her gentle face breaking into a soft smile. She greeted me warmly and led me to the room prepared for me. I sat down on a plush armchair, my body sinking into comfort I hadn't known for months. Julian stayed by the door, keeping his distance, but his eyes remained on me, steady and watchful. I listened to the wind brushing against the windows, the leaves rustling softly. For the first time in so long, Peace slipped into a corner of my heart, fragile, but real. Julian moved around the room, checking his phone, the security system, the windows. He explained that every contingency had already been arranged, and that I didn't need to worry, that my only task now was to rest and recover. I watched him, realizing then the stark difference between him and Landon. One used power to trap, the other used it to protect without demanding anything in return, not gratitude, not fear, not obedience. The quiet of the mountains, Julian's steady presence, and Mrs. Jeanette's gentle care became the first environment in many months where my body dared to relax. As Julian sat down near me, his voice low and warm, he said, "Rest, Claire. You've been through too much. I'm here. I'll protect you." I nodded, feeling the tightness in my chest ease, my pulse settling. My gaze drifted to the window where soft evening light filtered through the pines. I knew Landon was somewhere out there, still watching, still hunting. But with Julian here, I no longer felt helpless. The peaceful air of the mountains, the safety of the estate, and the unwavering protection around me marked the first small step toward healing, creating a temporary yet precious refuge where I could rebuild my strength, find clarity, and prepare for whatever came next. I sat there, watching Julian, absorbing the steadiness in his every movement. And for the first time in weeks, I felt not just like I was surviving, but living. Later that evening, the mountain house grew quiet under a canopy of warm lights. The scent of the meal Mrs. Jeanette had prepared drifted through the dining room, comforting in a way I hadn't experienced for months. I sat across from Julian, fingers lightly holding the fork, watching the way he served the dishes with a calm precision, as if every detail, even a simple dinner, deserved care. We talked in soft tones, the kind of easy, ordinary conversations that felt strangely grounding. A small laugh escaped me when Julian mimicked the voice of a character from the book he'd been reading to me. The gentle warmth in his eyes when I smiled made my heart quiver in a way I didn't expect. After dinner, Julian guided me into the small sitting room next to the library, where plush armchairs and tall shelves filled the space with an intimate glow. We picked books together, old volumes marked with handwritten notes along the margins, reminders of the thoughts he once lingered on. As we read, our conversations drifted into deeper waters: life, choices, fear, hope. The silence between us no longer felt empty but warm, like the quiet understanding shared between two souls slowly learning to trust. I sat close to him, a book in hand, though my eyes kept drifting to his face. His eyes followed mine too, the soft light accentuating the familiar lines of his profile. When I finally placed the book down, Julian didn't speak. He simply looked at me deeply, intently, as if listening to the things I couldn't voice yet. The air shifted, warm and still. My heart beat faster, not from fear this time, but from something unfamiliar: safety, anticipation, a longing I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Julian leaned toward me slowly, deliberately, giving me every chance to pull away, and when his lips met mine, it was gentle, brief, but filled with meaning. It was the first time since I woke in darkness that I felt warmth bloom inside my chest, not from survival, but from tenderness. The kiss chased away the lingering tremors of fear, easing my exhaustion, replacing it with something softer: trust, curiosity, a flutter of hope. We stayed beside each other afterward, still holding our books, though neither of us read a word. The silence settled around us like a blanket, peaceful and safe. Julian's smile, small, real, carried a quiet promise: patience, respect, protection. I returned it with a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The rest of the evening passed in whispers, soft laughter, gentle closeness. That first kiss marked something I hadn't dared believe in, that even in the aftermath of terror and loss, there could still be moments of peace, of joy, that I was allowed to have. We left the sitting room hand in hand, walking slowly down the softly lit hallway. Our footsteps matched, our breaths aligned, and for the first time since Landon began hunting me, I felt truly safe, truly alive, holding onto a trust that felt unshakable, no matter how dangerous the world outside remained. The night slipped quietly through the mountain estate, warm light brushing across polished wooden walls, while the only sounds left in the world were our breaths and the faint whisper of wind drifting past the windows. Julian sat beside me in the large armchair, his hand resting gently on my arm as if trying to steady my heartbeat and anchor me in safety. There was a tension beneath his touch, something unspoken that told me whatever he was about to say would alter the fragile peace we had just built. At last he spoke, his voice low and steady but edged with exhaustion. "Claire, I need to tell you something. About me, and the world I used to live in." I turned to him, waiting for each word, each breath, anxiety and anticipation threading together in my chest. Julian leaned forward slightly, his eyes searching mine for understanding before he continued. "Everything I've done, all the choices I made, the path I followed, I want to leave it behind. I want out of that world. Because of you. Because you made me see what truly matters." My heart skipped, a mix of warmth and confusion flooding through me. I knew he was speaking of the underground life, the violent webs of connections he had managed for years, the world I only glimpsed through fragments but never lived inside. His voice softened, though the certainty in it deepened. "You showed me I can live differently. I want a life without risk, without guilt, without the constant fear that someone will come after you, or that I'll have to destroy someone to protect you. I want to begin again, and I want you beside me." I lowered my gaze as my pulse surged, a strange blend of joy and unease filling me. His honesty shook me, but the shadows of the past, those 3 months under Landon's captivity, the feeling of being hunted still clung to my nerves. I wasn't ready to let all of that go. "Julian, would you really give everything up just because of me?" I asked, my voice soft yet steady. He looked at me with raw sincerity. "Yes. Everything I once cared about: power, money, influence, none of it matters more than you. You make me want a life I can be proud of when I wake up each morning, without ghosts chasing me." I inhaled slowly, my thoughts swirling. A part of me wanted to fall into his arms, to believe completely. But another part hesitated, wary, wounded, still shaped by fear. "I don't know if I can ever feel safe," I whispered. "I don't know if I'm just lying to myself when I pretend this world can be safe." Julian didn't rush his response. He simply placed his hand over mine, firm enough for me to feel anchored, gentle enough not to push. "I understand. Trust doesn't come easily to you right now. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, but I promise I will never put you in danger without reason. And you will always have a choice." I raised my eyes to him, meeting the deep, warm brown gaze that carried both strength and tenderness. For the first time in weeks, something inside me loosened. His voice lowered, softer now. "We can start from nothing, Claire. A life that is ours, slow, safe. And you can walk away whenever you want." I let out a long breath, the weight of the decision trembling inside me but no longer suffocating. Healing, living, hoping they all suddenly felt possible again. I need time to think," I murmured, my voice trembling but certain. He nodded, a faint smile crossing his lips, a patient smile, without pressure or expectation. "You have all the time you need. I'll wait. But I want you to know that this is real. I'm ready to start over. But you have to be ready to walk with me." I looked at him, the soft glow of the lamps highlighting a face both strong and gentle, and hope, quiet but undeniable, rose in my chest. The next step was mine to take, but for the first time, that choice didn't terrify me. It felt like possibility. Then, in the stillness of the night, his phone vibrated, the faint sound slicing through the quiet and waking me fully. The glow of the screen lit Julian's face as he answered. Landon's voice crackled through the speaker, calm, cold, sharp like ice. "We need to talk, Julian. A deal can end all of this without anyone getting hurt." Julian's grip tightened around the phone, a flash of tension in his eyes. I could feel his heartbeat spike even from where I sat. For a moment, instinct screamed for me to run, but his hand landed on my shoulder, steady and commanding. "Listen first," he whispered. "Then we decide." Landon proposed a meeting, listing terms, the method of exchange, the secrecy required. He spoke of rules and consequences, and what would happen if we refused. I watched Julian's face shift, part calculation, part caution, part something darker. He nodded slowly, his voice firm and controlled. "Fine, I'll meet you, but on my terms." The resolve in his words told me everything. He was not only protecting me, he intended to take control of the situation completely. We discussed a plan together. Julian talked about the meeting location, security layers, contingencies that would ensure I was never exposed to danger. I sat beside him, both terrified and trusting, watching the man beside me become not just someone who cared for me, but someone who would lead us forward with unshakable determination. When the call ended, Julian set the phone down, his gaze drifting to the dark window. I could feel the weight settling on his shoulders, the burden, the responsibility, the risk, but I could also feel the unwavering purpose beneath it. "They're trying to control the situation," he said quietly but firmly. "But we're not going to let that happen." He wrapped his arm around me, steadying me, passing strength into my bones. My heart trembled, a mix of fear and gratitude. Julian didn't center himself in the danger, he centered me, not out of fear, but out of love and duty. I understood then that the meeting wouldn't just be a confrontation with Landon. It would test everything Julian and I had begun to build: trust, connection, the fragile promise of a future. I felt Julian breathe beside me, felt the assurance in the way he held me, a silent vow that we would face whatever came next together. As the night stretched toward dawn, I stayed close to him, my heart balancing on the thin edge between fear and hope. Our lives stood on a precipice; a single misstep could shatter everything. But there was also a path forward, one we could choose together, no matter how uncertain it was. Julian squeezed my hand gently, reminding me that no matter what happened, neither of us would face it alone. And in that moment, I understood that real strength didn't lie in power or strategy, but in the trust and love we held on to, fragile yet fierce. I realized then that whatever risks lay ahead, they would be the proof of who we were and what we meant to each other, and slowly, quietly, I felt myself ready to stand beside him, even knowing the night ahead would not be peaceful, and the future remained shrouded in danger. The light from my phone screen flickered through the dark room as I scrolled through the information Julian had just sent about his meeting with Landon, and my heart began to pound when I noticed an irregular detail hidden in the schedule and the security positions he would be passing through. A cold tremor slid down my spine as the truth revealed itself. This wasn't a simple meeting, but a carefully engineered assassination, calculated down to the very second. I sat frozen, fear and panic swelling inside me, wondering why I had seen it first, why Julian, who was walking straight into danger, had not yet realized it. My fingers trembled as I opened a message and typed rapidly to read: Julian's head of security, the only person I trusted to save Julian if everything spiraled out of control. Each word I sent felt like a flare shot into the night, each period a heavy thud of my heart. I described the location, the projected time, the gaps in security, every small detail Julian might have missed. In the pressure and focus of preparation, knowing Reed was the only one who could react fast enough to shift the outcome and pull Julian back from the edge. Each second crawled by unbearably slowly, so slowly I became aware of my own breathing, the warmth in my palms as I hit send on the final message, sending out a sliver of hope that I knew might determine Julian's survival. Helplessness mixed with tension until my chest felt like it might split open, but beneath it rose a fierce clarity. I could not sit here while the only person I cared about walked blindly into a storm designed to kill him. When the phone vibrated with Reed's reply, hope leapt inside me. He had received everything, understood it all. His answer was brief, yet decisive, like an order dropping into place. He would deploy his team immediately to shield Julian and coordinate with security contacts I never even knew existed. Some of the weight lifted from my shoulders, though the anxiety stayed sharp, because we still had no control over how fast the danger might unfold. I scanned the room, the dim lamp casting soft shadows on the walls, every small sound making me jump. My heart beat loud as I imagined Julian moving through the night, unaware of the men lying in wait. Each step a possible fatal misstep. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply, trying to keep my focus, repeating in my mind every detail I had sent to Reed, replaying escape scenarios, praying Julian would take the right turn, praying that Reed's team and the hidden network of allies would move quickly enough to intercept what was coming. Fear pressed against responsibility in my chest as I realized I was no longer the one being protected. I was now the one holding Julian's life in my hands, through vigilance and instinct, and in that moment I finally understood that what I felt for him was not just emotion, but action, the courage to face danger to save the man I loved. Every click, every update on my screen, every shift in the security feeds Julian had sent became part of a strategy, and my heart seemed to beat in rhythm with the approaching danger, knowing hesitation could lead to catastrophe. When the clock edged closer to the moment Julian would arrive at the meeting point, I held my breath, tension anchoring me in place as I watched Reed's team move across the tiny screens, each signal a lifeline that could pull Julian back from death. Time slowed to a crawl, each imagined footstep echoing in my mind, and I understood fully then how thin the line between life and death truly was, and how I was holding the thread that might guide him safely home. When Reed confirmed his team was positioned, and Julian was now under protection, the crushing weight on my chest loosened, not disappearing, but slipping just enough to let me breathe again. Relief mixed with lingering dread. The battle wasn't over, not by far, but Julian was safe for now, and because I chose to act, he had a chance to live. From the depths of my heart, I felt our connection solidify, stronger than ever, knowing trust had taken root between us, trust that would carry us through whatever danger waited ahead. The police had already sealed off the warehouse district where Landon had been arrested, blue and red lights flashing across every shadowed corner, as patrol cars idled like silent sentries. I stood behind the metal barricade, my hand gripping my bag, my chest hollow yet filled with resolve. When they led him out, Landon's face remained icy, untouched by remorse or fear. A wave of disgust rose inside me as memories surged back days in captivity. Fists, threats whispered in the dark, but the trembling that once defined me was gone. I stepped forward, my footsteps heavy but unwavering, my eyes fixed on him, not seeking closure, not seeking forgiveness, but claiming back every piece of myself he had tried to break. He looked at me with the same mocking smile, but I didn't react. I let my eyes speak. I survived. I endured. And he no longer had any power over me. Officers asked me to stand farther back behind an additional barricade, but I wanted to be close enough to see his face, close enough to know beyond any doubt that this would be the last time our paths crossed, close enough to mark the moment the fear that haunted me died. When they pushed him into the vehicle, something inside me settled, a quiet finality rippling through my breathing, my pulse, my bones. The weight of months of terror slid off my shoulders, leaving only a fragile but unmistakable calm. I turned away without a word, without a tear. Only the silent promise to myself that this chapter was over. I was strong enough to walk away from the past now, strong enough to choose my future with Julian, and with myself free from every shadow Landon had cast over my life. My footsteps echoed on the cold pavement, each beat a declaration of freedom. I understood then that release didn't come from Landon's punishment, but from the moment I chose to let go, the moment I decided he would no longer claim space in my mind. As the first light of dawn threaded through the trees in the distance, it illuminated the path ahead, my path, the one I had fought to reclaim untouchable, untouched, and finally mine again. And that last encounter with Landon wasn't the beginning of new pain, but the closing of the door he once forced open, leaving room now only for hope, for love, and for the life I had fought so hard to take back. Late afternoon settled gently over the mountainside villa, pale gold sunlight drifting through the wide window and spilling across the wooden floor, casting warm patches of quiet light through the stillness. I stood by the window, my heart pounding wildly as Julian walked toward me, his posture steady, though his eyes carried a tenderness edged with worry. He paused, as if weighing every word, and then his voice rose low, warm, unwavering. He told me that everything was over now, that Landon had been arrested, that the danger had passed, and that it was finally time for me to choose my own path. Julian refused to pressure me. He didn't want my decision to come from gratitude or fear or the remnants of trauma. He wanted it to be mine, truly mine. I could leave, return to the life I once knew, familiar but still crowded with shadows and memories, or I could stay, begin again with him, build a life safer, quieter, and more whole than anything I had dared imagine. A chance to trust, to love, to be loved. He made it clear that my choice shouldn't spring from obligation, but from the sincerity of what he felt for me. The hope and longing in Julian's eyes made the weight of the moment gather deeply in my chest. I felt both terrified and thrilled. The months of captivity, the nightmares, the lingering echoes of fear, they still lived inside me. Yet beside Julian, I had felt something I had never felt before. A steady shelter, a fierce gentleness, a kind of devotion anchored not in possession, but in care. When I looked into his eyes, I saw his past, the shadows he had fought, the effort he had poured into rebuilding himself, and I saw honesty, quiet, unflinching. My heart shifted to a new rhythm, one made of trust and fragile hope. I drew a long breath, feeling my own heartbeat, feeling Julian's warmth close enough to steady me. The choice seemed impossibly large, and yet, for the first time, it also felt like freedom. I could go anywhere, do anything. But I could also reach for him, step into the quiet future waiting between us. Julian placed his hand on my shoulder, a faint smile lifting his lips, though his eyes shone with pure sincerity. He told me he would respect whatever I chose, though he wouldn't pretend he didn't want me to stay. His words felt like a bridge, stretching from the darkness behind me toward a future I had the right to shape. I stood there, heart racing, feeling the tremble of anticipation and liberation, realizing that this choice wasn't only about him or about me, but about embracing life again, embracing love and the happiness I had once believed I didn't deserve. I stepped forward, letting my hand brush his, warmth passing between us, soft but certain, and in that instant, I knew nothing could hold me back. I smiled, our eyes meeting in a quiet exchange of all the words we couldn't say, and I chose to stay, to begin again with Julian, to build the life we both deserved. A new chapter opened, no promises of forever, but a commitment to choose one another every day. Peace, tenderness, and freedom welled up inside me, and I vowed that nothing would take that away from me again. 3 months have passed since the day I chose to stay with Julian, and life has begun to settle into a gentle rhythm. Each morning I wake in the small apartment we picked together, sunlight filtering softly through the curtains, carrying a warmth that feels like safety. I pull on my white blouse and prepare for another day at the community clinic where I started fresh, a place where I can care for people who need kindness and attention. With every patient I greet, every quiet thank you I receive, something inside me heals a little more. My work is no longer just duty, it is a way of stitching back the broken parts of my own soul. I remember the nights of terror, the days of captivity, the nightmares Julian soothed when I could barely breathe. Now, I can use those memories to comfort others, and it feels like reclaiming a part of myself I thought was lost. Julian has changed too. He walked away from the shadows of his old life, the dangerous connections, the violent decisions, the world that once demanded so much of him. Now he spends his time on projects that matter, ones rooted in service and legitimacy, ones that let him step into the light he once thought he didn't deserve. More importantly, he makes time for us, for the life we're building quietly, patiently. In the evenings, he stops by the clinic with whatever book he's reading, and we talk, we laugh, or simply sit together in warm silence. We have learned to reshape our days from fear into gentleness, from survival into living. I remember the nights he held me through nightmares. Now, together, we create the safety I thought I had lost forever. Sometimes we walk through the neighborhood, Julian greeting neighbors with an ease that still surprises me, and I realize he's no longer a man of shadows, he has become someone who carries light with him. I find myself blending into the community too, feeling the quiet joy of contributing, of being part of something ordinary and kind. We cook dinner together, wash dishes, shoulder to shoulder, small acts, simple moments, but full of tenderness and connection. Sometimes Julian looks at me with an expression so full of gratitude and love that it knocks the breath out of me, and I know he feels the weight of the second chance we've both been given. The past hasn't vanished, it never will, but we've learned to live alongside it, to turn it into motivation rather than fear. Each day, I feel the strength and safety of this life settling deeper, a life I once believed would never be mine. Julian and I have built a place where fear no longer rules, only love, care, and quiet resilience. My work at the clinic is proof that healing is possible, not just physical healing, but the healing of the heart. And watching Julian choose meaning over power fills me with pride and peace. We know the future still holds challenges, but at least now, we have each other. The small moments, the smiles, the embraces, the genuine conversations are proof enough of our rebirth, of the life we're crafting together. These 3 months have moved slowly but surely, carrying us toward the belief that choosing to stay, to trust, to love, was the right choice, the first step toward a life that feels whole. And when I leave the clinic and see Julian waiting outside, waving gently, sending me all his trust and love in a single look, I feel my breath and my heartbeat fall into sync with the new rhythm of the life we're writing together. Julian and I live in a small apartment filled with light and warmth, where every corner carries memories of the storms we survived and the quiet moments we built afterward. We make no promises about perfection or forever, But each morning we choose to love, to care, to walk side by side. Those choices, small and steady, are what shape happiness. I watch Julian reading under the soft amber glow of the lamp, and a wave of peace settles over me. I know life won't always bend to our wishes, but we can choose how we meet it. Our story is proof that even after pain, loss, and fear, people can still find light, love, and the courage to begin again. The greatest lesson I've learned is that patience, trust, and genuine love can heal even the deepest wounds and help us rediscover ourselves amid life's storms. And I want to invite you, our listeners watching this video, to subscribe to our channel, to like and share this story so you won't miss the heartfelt, emotional tales we bring each day. We would love to hear what this story awakened in you, how its lessons echo in your own life. Please leave a comment below and share the thoughts that rise from the deepest part of your heart. Thank you for journeying with us through this story. I wish every one of you good health, joy, and peace in your daily lives. And until the next video, we'll be here, ready to bring you more stories filled with emotion, humanity, and meaning.